All right, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Queer Prophets Podcast. I'm Diane Conklin. I am happy to be here today. And just as a quick reminder, as we always do to get started, 3 pillars on queer prophets that we always try to talk about, always try to be inclusive of. And the first one is inclusion. The second one is community. And the third one is growth, because we can't have growth in our business without growing as a person. So those 3 things, I'm sure that as we get started here today, we will probably discuss 1, 2, or possibly all 3 of those items. So I am thrilled today to have sort of a new acquaintance friend, business associate that was introduced from somebody else, and I'm probably going to mess his name up, so he'll have to correct me. I've already done this once, but I am excited to have Eduardo Placer. Did I do it right? Yay!
Close enough. Eduardo
right.
Placer, but I got it.
Placer, yes. I'm sorry. There's nothing worse than screwing up somebody's name, but
it's fine. Yeah.
I am just honored to have you. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and learn more about what you're doing and all of that. So without further ado, Eduardo, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Diane, for having me. So it begins in 1986, Miami, Florida, Pinewood Acres Elementary School, show and tell. And I had done my homework, I had prepared, I was focused, and then Mrs. Fox looks at me and she says, "Eddie, are you ready?" And I said, yes. And I grabbed my stuffed animal seal and I walked up to the front of the class and I looked out at my classmates. It felt like 50, but there were 12. And I said, "Seals are mammals. They live in the water. They eat fish. Sometimes they're eaten by sharks." And I thought, this is really, really good stuff. And as I go to sit down, I think to myself, I have more to share. And then I go off script and then I say, I named him after someone in this class. And the moment I said that, everybody became really interested. Now the name of the seal is Sammy the Seal. However, what I choose to do in that moment is stand in front of my classmates and say, I named him after Brett MacGyver, who was the blonde popular boy that I had a crush on in 2nd grade in Miami, Florida in 1986, and it didn't go well. And in that moment, I could feel my temperature shift. I felt the temperature in the room shift. I looked out at my classmates and they had the look of confusion in their eyes. And then I quickly went to sit down. And I was awash with a feeling of shame because I spoke the truth. And today I have the privilege of being a story doula, an international public speaking coach. And I have been at the healing of that initial trauma my entire life. And in that moment, standing in front of my classmates, what I said to myself is, when I stand in front of people to speak, I can't be myself. I can't speak the truth. And if I do, it's dangerous. And I would imagine that for the majority of the people on this who are listening, who identify as LGBTQIA2+, there is a similar trauma story around being fully seen and heard for who we are. And one of the things that I believe as a public speaking coach is so much of our training and so much of the ways in which we have been educated is to conform and present an inauthentic authenticity. I mean, that is what we did in middle school. That's what we did in high school. That's what we did in college, and we had teachers who were formed in a very patriarchal colonial system who continued to propagate those micro and macro aggressions on us as we were presenting and performing. And I think I'm fucking over it. I just dropped the F-bomb. I'm done. And I think that what is emerging in a conversation around inclusion and diversity is really, how do we create space to allow diverse voices and diverse bodies to show up as they are, to communicate fearlessly in service of a message and the people who they are serving. So I was an actor for over 15 years. So I was a professional actor. I trained in a conservatory program. I did Shakespeare, musical theater. I became really good at playing other people because ultimately I was terrified of just being me. So, and I think, and this is something we can delve into as well, this is something that I've been reflecting upon, is for myself as a gay man, like, what is the impact of lying for the first 18 years of my life? right? What is it, and specifically around communication, right? Because there's no such thing as private speaking. All speaking is public speaking,
Right.
right? So the statistic is that 75% of people suffer from speech anxiety. I believe everybody else lies,
Right.
right?
Right.
So at some point, you're going to be afraid. There's some, and I think that there was, for me, a very specific way in which the way that I spoke as a young boy had people pick on me or bully me or have me want to deepen the quality of my voice, have shame around what I sounded like, and having to edit in a very machista Cuban upbringing in Miami, Florida. So, all of that, mess in the head is why I believe the statistic is why it's so high. And I think there's an opportunity when we're speaking specifically about diverse voices, people who not always had the opportunity and the privilege of being on stage and seen and heard, specifically as an authentic person, not a performance of authenticity, but truly authentic, that there's some room to learn and encourage and empower those voices to take the stage by storm. So that's my commitment. So I'm the CEO and founder of Fearless Communicators. It's a dynamic public speaking coaching business, and I work with thought leaders on what they say and how they say it.
Wow,
so I just dumped a bunch of stuff in there.
You did, and I'm like,
I dropped patriarchy, I dropped colonialism, I dropped all of it. Microaggressions, macroaggressions, and I think that, again, the business is called Fearless Communicators, not fear gone or fear done or fear without communicators, because fear is always going to be present. And I think one of the things that the fear is still present for me. I still have that same fear and panic that I had as a second grader when I present, specifically when I present in spaces that to me feel very male, energetically dominated. Like I have a fear around that. And I continue to step into that, and I continue to surrender and heal the little second grader, and continue to show up more committed to what I have to impart and share in service of the people than that fear of a second grader in Miami, Florida.
Wow. Wow, there was a lot there. You're right. You dumped it all in that first couple minutes there. But it's amazing because as you're telling the story, I find myself what I call leaning in, right? So you like totally had my attention. So how do we do? Let's start with this, because I love what you said about having the authentic conversation instead of the inauthentic, right? You said it more eloquently than I did, but
yeah.
How do we move from that? How do we move from that scared little boy or girl inside of us, no matter how old we are, right? And presenting as what we think we're supposed to look like or what we're supposed to say, as opposed to moving into that authentic voice of, here's really what I want to tell you.
Yeah, this is it. It's so good, because the funny thing is when people speak the truth, it takes care of itself. I'm gonna let that linger.
Yeah, I did on purpose, because it's deep when you think about it.
Because it's really profound, and I'm going back to that. Like I've been really reflecting on that lately. Like, again, what is the impact on me that I was a liar for the first 18 years of my life? That everything that I did was try to survive the truth being discovered about me. And it was in my home with the people who are supposed to love and care for you, and I have a beautiful relationship with my parents, right? But it doesn't matter. The point is that the experience that I had was threat everywhere, and that the truth was not something that anyone around me could handle. And that was my parents, that was my grandparents, that was my siblings, that was my school. I went to an all-male Jesuit prep school in Miami, Florida. That was my community. That was the world around me could not sustain the truth. And I instinctively knew that I couldn't verbalize that. So what I had to do was, as long as possible, lie. Right now, what is one of the major commandments that we have in the Bible? Thou shalt not tell a lie. What do your parents say? Don't be a liar.
Right.
So there's all this mixed messaging, and it's like this reality that the only thing there is for you to do to survive is to lie. And
fear, right? I mean, that's where that comes from.
Totally. And attempt to perform to pass something that is inauthentic. Right?
Right.
Now, so for me, I think what's special about this conversation, Diane, is that, I think as someone who is a shared member of the queer community, we can really like dig into this, because I think this is what nobody talks about.
Right.
When we talk about public speaking, they talk about move here, don't move here. You use right? But all of that is lipstick on the pig. Like all of that is like not dealing with the root issue, right? And I think that that's what there is for us to do. That's the opportunity. That's the healing work that there is for us to do. So there's several pieces of it. So one of the things that's emerged in the work that I have the privilege of doing is that what I am is a story doula. And I have the privilege of working with a lot of women, and I do this as a cisgender gay man. And I'm very clear that I'm not mansplaining public speaking. I'm a gay man that does not give me permission to mansplain anything to a woman. So I'm aware that even in that context, I have privileges that I think are important for me to just name and voice. And within that, what's emerged is the ability to create a container of safety and love for the truth to emerge, and then massage that truth, and then empower the speaker, embolden them with the truth to then be a vessel for that message. And that process begins first with the body, which nobody talks about. Right? So you have to begin with the body. So I say fearless communicators are grounded in body, present in mind, lead from the heart, and speak into the spirit of our shared humanity.
Do it one more time.
Say it again.
Yep.
Grounded in body, present in mind, lead from the heart, and speak into the spirit of our shared humanity.
Wow.
So there's a great saying, and it's from Papua New Guinea, from an indigenous community there. And what they say is knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the muscle. So we think we know it when it's in our brains, but we don't know it. Right. You know it when it's in your body. Now, as someone who trained as an actor, I know that, there's like, oh, I memorized, which is like off the page in my apartment by myself.
Right.
And then there's memorized with other actors and prop pieces and set pieces coming in and out and all that other stuff. That does not exist in the head, that exists in the body. Right. There's a dropping down of information and content. Now, what happens is people fail to prepare their body. What they do is they spend every last moment, I call it tweaking, not speaking, right? Hashtag tweaking, not speaking, where they're micro tweaking and micro editing what they say, and obsessed with some conversation about perfectionism, and obsessed about memorizing or getting everything right, which is all about them. It's all about the speaker. It has nothing to do with your audience.
Right.
So the beginning work is really all about grounding and connecting to your body, connecting to your breath, understanding where we carry tension, speaking from a place of expansion, not from a place of constriction, right? Not being tight, but being open. So a lot of that stems from, theatrical training. So really grounding into your body and connecting to your body. Also warming up your jaw, your tongue, your larynx. I mean, there's so many pieces of your body that contribute to the event of speaking. What happens is people warm up 5-10 minutes into their presentation, and then it's over. Then they're warm.
Right.
So they're, yeah.
This is really interesting, because one of the things that I relate this to for me is I talk about the difference between knowledge and know-how, right? Which is kind of what you're saying, right? Knowledge is in your head. Know-how means that you can translate it through your body out into the world, right?
Totally.
And so it's that brings me to that. And then the other piece of this for me, as somebody who has a master's degree in exercise physiology, is this whole physical piece of it, right? Grounding it into your body, right? So I'm sitting here thinking about, at the gym or on the bike or doing some sort of physical activity. So many times we talk about how that gets us out of our head, right? And how it grounds us and how we feel better. And I totally relate it to what you're talking about from a speaking perspective, because it's that piece, right? It's that piece of being present, right? And having that muscle memory of the difference between memorizing and really knowing your lines is the muscle memory, right?
And I make a distinction between presentation and performance, and what I call presensation. So presensation is the context of being present, right? Where you're in alignment with your body, you're in alignment with your voice, you're in alignment with your message. And all of that is being channeled in service of your audience.
Yeah.
You disappear. And there are, I'm sure you've witnessed people, like when they're in that space of flow where you're not aware of their technique.
Yeah.
You know there's technique, you know they're freaking killing it, and it feels like but you're in an experience as opposed to a technical exercise.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we've been lectured at, we've been talked down to.
Yeah.
I mean, that is our educational system, right? And then there was a rare teacher that we had that had things come alive. They when they spoke, they were outside of their bodies. They connected and conjured and created like magicians, realms and worlds and it could have been math, for God's sake, or algebra, who cares? But when you have that teacher, like it like there's a way in which that information exists in service of you, and it's like an act of generosity, and there's nothing like it. So that's part of the shift. So we begin with the body, and then we move into the mindset. And the mindset piece is acknowledging that there is some shame or fear or doubt that we have about ourselves that is there always. And it looks like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too girly, I'm too, tall, and it's all of these things. For me, I'm going to say something, I'm going to be responsible for it because it's horrible, but because the thing is that we have a bully inside our mind that is worse than any other bully that's out in the world. So my bully, the fear is that that someone in the audience is going to think or call me a faggot.
Yeah.
And my instinct and impulse is to want to cover and protect and hide anything that would give that away, any hint of it. And that's like my knee-jerk, tight response, which is a learned mechanism from instinct and impulse from childhood, that I've carried throughout my life. And if I can get into my body and surrender that, right, then what happens, and acknowledge that there are these things, I can welcome them in and acknowledge that that's not true. I say that when I speak in front of audiences, like my fears are you all think that I'm a little gay. Well, guess what? I am gay. Yay, you're smart. You get a brownie. You figured it out. Ding, 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 clang, 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 went the trolley. Ding, 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 went the bell. Zing, So like and the moment that happens, what happens is I'm liberated. And then my show-tunitis, the way that I, burst out into song and dance at the drop of a hat, my sensibility, my sense of humor, like everything is just then out, and I feel free, right? And then I can be out there with them as opposed to in a conversation surviving my fear, right? Mm. Then the next space is then how do you craft and create content that's heart-centered? So it's all about connection. Maya Angelou has a very famous quote that I'm going to butcher, which is, people don't remember what you say, they remember how they feel about you.
Right.
And it's the same. And if they feel your content, they're going to remember your content. If they don't feel your content, it's going to be in one ear and out the other.
Yep.
Right. So how are you crafting content? It's all about storytelling. It's all about vulnerability. It's about authenticity and truth. Right? That when you share that it resonates with the audience. So it's crafting content that is intended to connect. And I say not just connect, but to connect, meaning they're an action through the connection.
Right. Well, and you use the V word, right? The vulnerability. And that totally. I think puts people back into the fear mode, right? Oh my gosh, he wants me to be vulnerable. Oh my gosh, if I talk to them from my heart, they're going to actually see me. And what if now, what if now they use the faggot word, or they know something that, and I think that's where that piece comes from, right? Is we've all been taught, from that second grade little boy to vulnerability is now bad.
Yeah.
And so isn't it interesting that all of these things kind of put us back into that fear mode?
Well, vulnerability is seen as weak.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Yes. However, now I make a distinction between vulnerability and therapy, and they're not the same thing.
Right.
Right. Now, there are spaces and circles like your therapist or AA or Al-Anon or, you know, a men's group or a women's group or something where there is a space for you to share something that you've never shared before. You know, speak of a trauma or something that feels like you want to share. And if you're speaking in front of an audience, right, I think that it becomes very awkward if your expectation is that the audience be your therapist. Right?
Yeah. Personal,
and I think
but
that's
not private.
where it turns. That's where it turns. Now, I've had people reveal unbelievably private things, right? However, they are in command of the narrative, and there is a journey that they're taking us on. And they can have an emotional response. They can cry. There can be tears. And they don't need me as an audience member to take care of them.
Right.
That's where it switches. So I think for people who are like debating, should I, you know, vulnerability, you know, authenticity, therapy, you know, I think that that's a good gauge for yourself. Like, am I on the other side of this? Have I done the work for myself to be able to be with whatever shows up about that and be like, I mean, I've been out for over 20 years, you know, I'm healing, I'm consistently healing, you know, my relationship to what it means to be a faggot. Like all of that is like a part of my, and I'm on the other side of that, right? If I were to verbalize that for the first time in front of a group of like thousands of people at a conference, it may feel like, what the fuck is happening? Like, this is really strange, right? So I think that that's something to gauge. And like, is the sharing generous or is it selfish, right? Is it manipulative? Right? Or is it really generous? And I think that that's a type of gauge that you want, because that's when an audience starts feeling this is icky. This is really gross, right? So then so we're grounded in body, present in mind, lead from the heart. And the last piece of it I say is speak into the spirit of our shared humanity. And what I mean by that is the word spirit, the root word of the word spirit is the same root word as the word to inspire, or to aspire, or to expire. So to inspire and to expire means to inhale and to exhale, right? Literally from the Latin root, that's what it means. Spirare means to breathe, right? To aspire with breath, right? Like the raising, to uplift with breath. So so spirit is breath. There is spirit in breath. And what happens is when we breathe, we're also speaking. So when I'm speaking, I'm exhaling. I'm also expiring. And what happens is you inhale that. You breathe it in. You breathe in my words. You breathe in my intention. You inspire what it is that I'm saying. And then you have an experience, right? And it may be me. It may be the people that I speak about. It may be the message that I leave you with. But then what happens is you're moved with spirit. And then what happens is you speak spirit. You share about it. You're like, oh my gosh, I went to this amazing event. I heard the speaker. The people who you're speaking to have no idea who that person is. But in that moment, I become alive. The speaker becomes alive to whoever the listener is, right? And if you think about the stories that we tell about ancestors, the stories we tell about our family, the stories that we tell about the people who are no longer with us, every time we give breath to them, every time we speak their name and we give voice to their story and their voice, they live, right? They live in the memory and now the knowledge of another human being. So their spirit continues alive. So, so it's like that sacred connection, you know, that I think is what brings us and unifies us all as human beings, is this work.
Wow. That's, you know, it's amazing. I've never heard anybody talk about, you know, speaking in that regard. And I laughed when you said earlier about, you know, the walk in the V and, you know, the whole mechanics of it has always made me laugh, because it's like, who, you know, if you're on stage and that's what you're thinking about, you're probably not delivering a good message, right?
And I'm going to guess, and you, Diane, there are very specific moments that are useful to move and when not to move.
Right.
Now, that is something that you practice.
Yeah.
So that is part of rehearsing, right? So learning how to prepare for the event of speaking. Right. What happens is people spend all night long figuring out what the hell they're going to say, and they get on a stage and then they wing it. Right. And then what happens is they're moving back and forth and 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 back and forth, which is fine. Now you can have I say that we're all on a sliding scale of getting better, right? There are things that very accomplished speakers do. I call it thrilling and less thrilling, that they do that is thrilling. And there's some things that they do that are less thrilling, and very accomplished speakers, right? Barack Obama, what's her name? Breonna Brown, one of the most powerful TED Talks ever. She begins her TED Talk saying, so not the best way to start a TED Talk, right? And who the hell cares? She went viral. She spoke the freaking truth, right? And I think I think part of it is that we also have so much shame and fear around how we were taught our speaking, that we're not actually willing to be, it's not a safe space within which to grow, because our managers and our leaders and our teachers don't have the tools to actually encourage us and bring distinction to how to prepare to speak, right? And how to empower us so that we can choose what emerges. And I think that that's where sometimes, specifically women are told to deepen their voice or not move around, or, they're like told to not be women when they're presenting, so then they perform quote unquote masculine, and they're told, well, you're not being a woman. So they're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to be doing with myself. Do you know what I mean? So there are all these ways in which, or you have someone who's a foreigner, whose English is not their native language, that works so hard, they're so ashamed about their accent that they stop themselves from speaking, when who the hell cares? Right? Yeah, but they've been edited and micro-edited about, and they're so self-conscious about that. And it's like, I have a freaking accent. I speak 3 languages. I speak 4 languages. Who the hell cares? Listen to what I have to tell you.
Right. And it's interesting what I'm hearing you say, that you didn't say the words, but the message to me is you can do wrong things, right? You can move at the wrong time. You can start your presentation with so, right? Which is not the best way to do it, but if you speak from your heart, and the message that you put out touches people because it's about them and not you, that's more important than any, speaker training, if you will, that's going to tell you, here's the outline, and here's the things you're supposed to say and not say, and here's how you dress, and here's the times when you should move and all that. If you throw all of that out and can just speak from the heart and be you many times, it's going to be Breonna Brown viral.
Now, Diane, what I'm going to say is, now Breonna Brown is a lecturer. Right. She's a teacher.
Right.
She does a lot of this, right? So it's not her first rodeo. She has a lot of on the ground training.
Yeah.
So I am not saying wing it and just speak from the heart.
Right.
Right. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, the most important piece is that you're in a conversation for connection with your audience. Yeah. Right. And they will forgive anything else. Now, what will elevate your message is you knowing, and not because somebody told you and forced you to do it, but now is not a good time for me to move because I'm in the middle of a thought.
Right.
So what happens is, if I'm moving now, people are wondering, why are they moving, as opposed to actually listening to what I'm saying. Right? It becomes a distraction. Now, the thing is, we're distracted because we're nervous. Right. Or we're distracted because we don't know what the hell to be doing with ourselves. Right. So part of that is, I think that speaker training is important, right? And I happen to be a public speaking coach, right?
I didn't mean to dissuade that.
No. But I think it's important, like, what type of speaker training are you looking for? Right. And I think that part of it is the incubator of where you're practicing, like, where are you in practice, a place that is conducive and supportive and empowering, or is it belittling, condescending, and negative? Right. And that could be the workplace, that could be a Toastmasters group, it could be anything. It could be your networking group. It could be an array of different spaces so you want to surround yourself by people who are in a conversation for getting better, right? Yep. And to arm yourself with the tools to be aware, bring some distinction to what are you doing that is serving your message, and what are you doing that gets in the way of it. And there's no panel of judges. This isn't the Olympics. This isn't synchronized swimming. This is not gymnastics. I have a client of mine. She's an internationally ranked rhythmic gymnast. And she failed to qualify for the Olympic team by 1/100th of a point. Oh. And it was her year. And I said to her, when you speak, you're speaking to a panel of judges, that every time you or you like, or you sew, or you move, or you have too many gestures, or whatever, you think that you're getting deducted points from a perfect 10. Nobody's doing that. There's nobody out there. There's nobody grading you. People are out to have an experience, and they want it to matter, and they want it to be of value of their time. To talk about value, they
Yeah.
want it to be worth their time.
Yeah.
Right. And if your commitment is to make it worth their time, then it's going to be worth their time. If your commitment is to look good, if your commitment is to prove that you're good enough, then that's all about you, and they're going to be bored.
Yeah. And, it'll be interesting to get your take on this, because you said, Breonna Brown is a lecturer. And to my way of thinking, there's a little bit of a difference between lecturing in a classroom and speaking in front of,
Mm-hmm.
groups of corporations and some of that. So there is, while there is transfer, I think at least to me, they're different kinds of speaking engagements.
And what I would offer about Breonna is that I think that she's a beautiful storyteller.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that is the piece of it that what she is in practice, right? So I think that she is somebody who knows what it's like to stand in front of a group of people and speak. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have shame. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have fear, because she does, and she talks about it all the time.
Sure.
Right? And I'm an introvert too. She talks about, or I'm an ambivert, as I like to call it. People are shocked. They're like, Liza Minnelli, this one is not an introvert. But the truth is, I find it exhausting, presenting and being on stage, and I basically self-soothe fully fetal watching Netflix after I do a workshop or anything. I really need to decompress and recalibrate, because it takes a lot of energy, for me to be of service of the message, and also listening to and pivoting depending on what is the need of the people who are in the room.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about Breonna is that she's a really effective storyteller. And I think that's what makes the difference. I think facts and figures, whatever, they can help to ground down, and they give gravity to your message. But if it's all like bullet points and, who cares? They're bored to tears, right? And if there's a way that you can elevate whatever the content is so that it soars through stories, then then I think you're faring better.
Yeah.
I think actually making a difference.
Yeah. And the story, that's what people remember, right? I mean, if you think about how did we get some of the tales and the things that we know through storytelling? I mean, now it's easy to document stuff now, but, back when, even, I'm showing my age a little bit, but even when I was growing up, I mean, stories got passed down from generation to generation by sitting and listening to grandpa or grandma or, Aunt Bessie or whatever, talk about and talk, tell the stories. And I think that's the captivating part is, the combination of the story and the facts and figures, right? It's if you can interrelate those and pull the facts and figures into a story somehow, it's always more captivating for your audience to be hearing that.
And I mean, that is how language originated. Yeah. That is why we are here. That is how bonds of tribe and community and culture were formed. It is the Odyssey, it is the Iliad, it is the Aeneid, it is an orator, storyteller, speaker in front of an audience, telling and sharing and recounting a story. It is the Bible, right? It's all parable, it's all story. All of the lessons are in story, right? And I think that our minds are built to process that. What happens is when you speak in story and you also are triggering my senses in your speaking, you can target 5 to 7 parts of my brain, as opposed to the facts and the figures, which targets 1. Not going to remember that.
Yeah.
Right. But if 5, 7 parts of my brain are triggered, I'm more likely to remember it. Right. So there's a neuroscience around the power of storytelling and the impact of storytelling as well. And I'm going to share this with you. There's another great saying. I have this program called the Fearless Force Public Speaking for Visionary Women Leaders that I've had the privilege to lead. I'm about to lead a program in New York City. It's the 17th gathering. It is only for women. It's part of my commitment to help elevate and give light and voice to women and thought leadership in that space. The statistic right now in the US is that 70% of professional speaking opportunities are for men and 30% for women, which is a woeful statistic. I mean, it is shameful.
Yep.
And so part of this program, we've done it in New York, in San Francisco, in Tel Aviv, and then also in Australia, in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And in the work in Australia, we've had the privilege of working with Aboriginal elders. And there's a famous saying that comes from one of the Aboriginal traditions in Australia, which is, it's something around the realm of the story is hunting its storyteller.
Mm.
And none of it is new, right? The story of my shame and my fear and Sammy the Seal, like none of that is new.
Right.
Like that story has been around since some little gay caveman was like standing somewhere really wanting to like do the tribal dance and knit with his mother, and the father was like, no, you have to go carry the spear and kill the animal.
Right.
Right. So like the story of our human experience crosses generation and generation and generation, and what's happening is that that story at times aligns with the person who is in space to give voice to that story from the specificity of their perspective, their life experience, etc. So the universal truths remain the same.
Right. Yep.
Now, the specificity and the context which emerges from the person, the human being who gets to transmit that message, can feel unbelievably new and fresh, even though that story is a story that has been told.
Right.
Right. And I think that that's the power. And I think for the people who are listening, and if they're thinking about their businesses, or if they're thinking about their brands, how they communicate about that, or an idea that they have, none of it is new. And there is an alignment of who you are and the story that there is for you to give voice to, and it's hunting for you. And it's acknowledging that there is that alignment. And when you find that alignment, it's unbelievably powerful to be in service of that.
Yeah. And, you know, I think one of the things too is, you know, we've talked about this from a speaking perspective, but, you know, as I'm sitting here thinking, you know, this is true for if your mode of communication is writing, right? It's the same thing. If you apply those same things to your writing, it works the same way. And all of us as business
Absolutely.
owners are certainly speaking, whether you're speaking in front of big crowds or it's just a staff meeting, right? Or if it's on the phone with your two-person team, or, you know, whatever it is. So I think all of this is so applicable. And certainly if you're speaking, it's certainly more applicable, but, or you know, or seems more applicable, but I think there's so many ways to play this. Let me ask you this. This is going to seem probably a little strange, but
no, go for it.
So you've got this second grade little boy, right? And then you've got the person at 18, and you've got the person now. So I know there was more than one thing. Obviously, it's a process of healing and those things. But what would you say is the biggest thing that got you from, you know, moving you from the fear and the, you know, the all of that into a position of being that authentic you?
You know what's interesting? There have been several things that I can kind of jam here with. I think that there is something very powerful about coming out of the closet. So at 18 years old, and get that that's public speaking, I stood in front of my father and I said, I'm gay. That's public speaking. Stood in front of my mother and I said, I'm gay. That's public speaking, right? So again, there's no such thing as private speaking. All speaking is public speaking, right? That the courage and the alignment of that truth to who I was a huge liberator. And I think for me, what that created, like as a kid, like what I wanted to do more than anything in the world was sing and dance. And I think my parents were afraid that that was a little gay, or that's not what little boys, you know, do, or that's what you know, you could be a lawyer, be a doctor, be all this other stuff. And it's not just gay kids that have that experience. The parents are like, don't do what you love, do what's going to give you money, right? And that may be generational, but there's an inner artist, or there's an inner creative, or there's an inner athlete, or like something aspirational that we all have that's like silenced and shut down, because it's like who you are will never be good enough to achieve whatever it is that you imagine there is to achieve. So I think that coming out at 18 for me, like the journey of that was a great liberator. One, because I was finally in alignment with truth, and I could start exploring and landing on what is the expression that is authentically me. And I went off the deep end, you know, like I would, you know, like it was like, you know, it was like, there was a lot of play in college, you know, and what that looked like and how I expressed myself and dyeing my hair and, you know, and not watching what I said. And, now I don't put the edits on it, but like, to say, yes, like I would have said that at 16 or 17 or 18.
Right.
So I think that freedom was huge. Not that didn't come without a cost, because there was a cost to that freedom, and that impacted my relationships, that impacted my family. But to be in the game and in the courage of the discovery of who am I, and who am I as seen by other people, became a very powerful conversation. Then what also emerged is that I trained as an actor. So I had the privilege of, when I graduated from undergrad, I went to UPenn, I studied English, very pre-professional, and then graduated from undergrad and said, I played by everybody's rules, now I'm gonna do what I wanna do. So I became a singer, actor, dancer. And I took dance classes, and I sang, and I acted, and all of that stuff. And then traveled all over the US. And then I had the privilege of attending one of the top conservatories in the US. And in that program, all the grad actors teach public speaking to undergrads. So what happened there is that I began to formulate an approach that felt in alignment with my theatrical training and some of my own transformational work, and realizing that nobody teaches public speaking, or very few people do, with this context. It's move here, don't move here, memorize what you say, but it's like embodied communication is not something people are taught, right? Even teachers who are speaking all the time, nobody ever teaches them how to speak.
Right.
Right? They're like, go stand in front of the class, just talk, because all you're doing is just talking. It's not the same thing, right? So that was, I think that was a crux. And then I remember I was at an audition, and when I was auditioning in New York, I loved auditioning, and I was a little bit of a daredevil. I always loved having a moment in the audition that to me felt dangerous and scary. Mm. Like I was going to try something that felt like this can either really go well, like this could really pay off, or I'm going to fall on my face. I'm just going to try something, right? And that's what I did. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but it was like, at least I'm trying something.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I was at an audition for something that I didn't get. And I think the song was it's an obscure show tune from a musical called Closer Than Ever from the 1980s by Maltby and Shire. And there's a song called What Am I Doing Up on the Roof, which is a song that a stalker sings. It's like a comedic song, right? And he's singing the song, like not knowing why he's like it's raining, it's pouring, and he's on the roof of this person's house that they're in love with. And I jumped on the piano, and I sat on the piano, and I was like singing from the top of the piano. And after I finished, he looked at me and he said, "You're fearless, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." Like I didn't think twice about it, but I just said yes. And then I left. And then after that, it was like, that took a lot of courage to say that, because I'm plagued with fear in everything that I do.
Right.
But there was like this adoption of that word as really being in alignment and trust with my instinct and my intuition, and serving that as opposed to where the fear mind wants to kind of hold me back.
Yeah.
And then I think on top of that, I had the privilege of, I went to a Catholic school, I went to a Jesuit prep school in Miami, Florida. And there's a service called Men and the motto of the Jesuit order is Men and Women for Others. And I've always been called to serve. I've always felt like I've had a calling to serve. And what I realized is that my acting career was not that. It was a lot of fun. I worked a lot. And like I wanted to be of service in the world in a way that was greater than that. And I realized that if I could work with the people who were poised to make the biggest difference and elevate how they show up to speak in the world, and elevate their message so it makes a difference at scale and how they share it with other people, that to me feels like the perfect confluence of my gifts and abilities of service in the world. And that's what it is. I am a part of conversations that I am nowhere near the expert in, but I don't have to be the expert in. But what I can do is be a vessel from which their message is elevated so that it resonates and reaches more people. And that's really powerful. And I think why I get right, every day feels like a new day. You know, the diversity of the clients that I serve is really broad. You know, again, men and women with an array of expertise, from like cybersecurity to the educational system, to reducing recidivism in prisons, to veganism, to corporate board governance. It's like so broad. And at the end of the day, we're just people trying to connect with each other.
Yeah.
And I think if we're always in service of that, I think whatever it is rises and elevates.
Yeah.
And that's what there is to do.
I love this idea of being in service. I think that's, I think that's the heart piece, right? Is leading from that. And I think there's so many ways and so many that it looks so different for different people, right? Somebody's softer, somebody's a little more harsh or, gruff, or their voice inclinations are a little different, but it's that piece of serving from the heart. And I think when you get to the point where you can do that, you have overcome some of the fear, and while things certainly can still go wrong, I think there's much less that can go wrong when you're serving from the heart than, when you're tucked in behind the fear of, gosh, what if they really see me, kind of thing. So, and
at the end of the day, they just want to see you. That,
right.
I mean, the thing that we're most scared of is actually what they love.
Yeah.
And when they see it, they're so grateful.
Yep.
And I'm going to share, there's a great song that I learned in kindergarten. I'm going to sing it for you. And it's called Everyone Makes Mistakes. And it goes like this. Everyone makes mistakes, so yes, they do. Your sister and your brother and your mother, father too. Big people, small people, matter of fact, all people. Everyone makes mistakes, so why can't you? If everyone in the whole wide world makes mistakes, then why can't you? The moment you make a mistake on stage, it humanizes you. And everyone's like, oh my God, they're just a person.
Right.
And how you recover from that, nobody's counting, nobody's tracking.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if who you are is being of service, if you're prepared, if your commitment is to them, they'll be with it.
Yeah.
But if it's about you and it's selfish and it's manipulative and you're not prepared and you're totally winging it, then it's a sinking ship.
Yeah.
And you only have yourself to blame. I think there's a certain level of personal responsibility there is to take. And listen, I've been on sinking ships. Do you know what I mean? I can tell you how many auditions that I went on as an actor where I was like, I didn't warm up. And it was a disaster. I was not an 8 o'clock in the morning tenor, like one of those 8 o'clock in the morning tenors who like, high voice, it's just like so potent and present. Not that. I like birthed like yops and sounds that came out of my mouth that were like, wow, that was ugly. Okay, lesson learned, but I was too embarrassed, and ashamed to like warm up in my apartment at 7 o'clock in the morning, because I didn't take the time to prepare in the way that there was for me to prepare to ultimately disappear to be in service of whatever there was for me to tell.
Yeah, so. I love that. And the other thought that I had while you were singing to me, which I love, by the way, is, you can also utilize all of these strategies that you've talked about for video, because one of the reasons people don't record video is exactly what you just said, right? Well, what if I screw up? Well, okay, then I have to re-record. No, you don't. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I just make fun of myself because I said a wrong word or, whatever. Now, I didn't say be unprofessional, something crazy happens and re-record it. But the fact that you were talking about, people want to see you, and the fact that you made a mistake, or that you said a wrong thing, or that you tripped on your shoe or whatever, just makes you more human. And I think the same thing happens when you can be funny, right? I have a tendency to make fun of myself. Because gosh, God knows there's plenty to make fun of. Right? But totally. It's that humor on the stage that people are like, oh my gosh, she can laugh at herself, when she does these silly things that help. So we have covered so many of the things I was going to ask you that I didn't even have to ask you. So
I love it. Yeah.
I know you were just so prepared. Anything else that you want to leave people with? Any famous last words or anything that we didn't talk about that you just want to make sure that people really get?
What I would offer is speak. Just go out there and speak. The story is hunting its storyteller.
I love
right?
that.
And you know it. And and more than anything, You can also say the message is hunting its messenger, right? And there is a truth. There is a truth that you're hiding, right? That the revelation of that truth may create freedom and an opening in your life that you never thought possible, right? Shame and fear festers in darkness and in silence. And when you bring it to the light, it all disappears. So I think that there's a real opportunity for people to lean in on their personal experience, share from the heart, create intentional connection with other human beings, and be of service of what there is for you to be of service of in the world, right? And do so with abandon, and do so fearlessly.
Yeah, you know, I love the fact that you said, and you know it, right? There's always that little niggly, right, is what I call it, either in your brain or in your heart or in your solar plexus,
your
or your
gut,
gut, whatever that whatever your place is, right? That is that nagging thing that knows that there's something that you're supposed to be doing, and it's that story, right, that you're supposed to be telling that you're not telling, that you're holding back from. So I love that you said, and you know it, and I think that's something that we don't often fess up and say, yeah, you're right, I do know it. So I think that's important. So,
and
well,
there's unbelievable liberation on the other side of that.
Yeah,
it's so liberating.
Yeah.
Well,
terrifying. This has been amazing. Eduardo, give us your contact information. How do people get in touch with you if they want to take you up on some of this training that you do and get some more information about who you are and where to find you?
So the best place is www.fearlesscommunicators.com. Again, that's www.fearlesscommunicators.com. And then I have a special gift. So when you go onto the website, you can leave your email address, and then I have a PDF pocket guide, which I call 10 simple backstage tips to go from a speaker to a star. And it's my opportunity to be Jiminy Cricket for you. So you can have it in your pocket the next time you speak. And I talk a lot I have some physical warm-ups, I have some mindset exercises, but some ways to really ground you so that you have at least the beginnings of a technique to show up in service of your audience and not at the whim and mercy of your fear and your shame.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing that. And I'm actually going to go because I'm curious to see what it is and how I can increase my my speaking. So that's
yes, Diane.
Jump in on that for sure. So again, thank you so much. This has been so amazing. And again, as so many times in these interviews that I do, we end up in places that I had no idea when we started. So which is always fun. So if you're a speaker, and as Eduardo said, you know, there is no such thing as private speaking. That really stuck out for me. But or wannabe, or shooting video, or writing. There's so many nuggets that you were just left with, and I would definitely encourage you to go back and listen to this. So many amazing things that were brought out, and so hopefully. And as always, we covered the three. Always, we covered the three pillars, right? We talked about inclusion, we talked about community, and we certainly talked about growth in a variety of different ways. So until next time, I'm Diane Conklin. You've been listening to the Queer Prophets podcast. Leave your comments, and we will, who knows, maybe we'll invite Eduardo back for another conversation at some point in time.
Yes.
Thank you so much.